So, guys, I want to talk about Chainsaw Man, the Reze arc. And I really think this is a very important video that everybody should watch because really one of the big themes of the Reze arc is the dangers of manipulation. And one of the big things about Chainsaw Man and is that there's some people who feel bad for Reze, and also I do understand that there's different information. Like obviously you read the manga, there's one story, and then obviously you watch the movie, there's another story. And I've not read the manga, but I really want to talk about the movie, and I also want to talk about a few personal stories really quick that I had a friend in high school who, went through a very hard time. She was assaulted in high school. And then what happened was that when she got out of high school, she would always be dating different men. Like, I think, one year she was dating, six or seven different men. And she'd always have the same story of, oh, well, you know what, I was, abused in this relationship, that relationship. And, her stories didn't really add up, really. And then what I found out about her was that usually when things didn't go well in relationships, she would always just lie and make up stories about people. But she was also somebody that also had a reputation for, always just trying to, be intimate with different people, or, it always just, paying, for the men, that she was with, she'd always buy them groceries, whenever that she wanted to have sex with them, she would say, hey, what, let's make that happen, really, everything you want, really. And then, the day that you, just, disagree with her or say, no, I don't want to do this or I don't want to do that, or hey, I want to do things my way, really, that's when she kind of turned, really. But she also had a consistent pattern of bringing people to court, putting restraining orders on people, and other things like that. Um, and I and I also know some people who've had their lives ruined because of her, and she's gonna keep that pattern the rest of her life, really. And I think a few years ago, we ran into each other, and we were talking, in a park, really, and she was saying that she was, assaulted by three or four different people. Her story really didn't add up, really, and she was saying, hey, why don't we get back together because we were friends in high school? Let's get in a relationship. I was kind of saying, nah, I lied that I was with somebody else, really, because it always seems like with her, there's always stories about assault, if you dated over 10 people and they all assaulted you, if you're saying you were assaulted by three or four people outside a relationship, and you're always trying to get into relationships, there's always a negative story. It's concerning, really, so I really, if it's all true, then that's messed up, really. But also, it always was the same type of manipulation, the same type of victimhood, the same type of always going to court with everybody that she was with, and everything like that. It's concerning, really. And I think with the Reze arc, I'm a little worried that some people may look at Reze and feel sorry for her, and then also say to themselves, you know what, if there is a relationship like that, or there is a person like that, I should go after them. You should not go after people you feel sorry for. And this is a little rough. I have another friend who lives in Texas, and they're going through a very hard time in their life. They've made some bad choices in relationships. They have mentioned to me they've gone in and out of jail. They've mentioned to me that, other things as well, really. They're expecting a child, and that, one of their spouse is actually not going to be there for them. They're going to be oh, well, they're the typical type of, oh, well, I'm not going to be there for my kid type of thing because I'm mad that, there were an accident. I'm mad the birth control didn't work. But the thing about it is that, they're looking for me to be a friend, possibly maybe going down to Texas and hanging out with them, possibly, talking to the boyfriend, being like, hey, you know what, you got to step up and be a man. And then also her boyfriend is black. So obviously maybe because I'm mixed race part black, be like, hey, you know what, don't be another example of a black father walking out on the kids, type of thing, really. So what I would say is, it's also another type of friendship that I have to be very, very careful of. And I also have a third friend in California, who, every single time, she comes here, I always treat her out to dinner. Every single time, she comes, I'm always, paying for things, for her and stuff like that. And she definitely is very religious. So, so there might be a sense that maybe she wants to convert me to Christianity, or be like, hey, don't go to wrestling shows, or hey, be friends with my friends and whatever, really, or try to force friendships, or just try to force me to be religious, or force me to be a vegetarian, really. So there are many different types of manipulation that we deal with. There's many different types of ways people manipulate us. So I want to talk a little bit about the Reze movie now, and talk about how it deals with manipulation, what to be careful of. The first thing I want to talk about is the manga series and the front cover. Like I said, I never read it, but the front cover of the manga series, you see Reze looking at you. She's on the front cover. She's naked and she's looking at you. So the first thing that we have to talk about is sex appeal. That usually a lot of manipulative people, and I know like usually it's the stereotypical role of men being manipulated by beautiful women, is that's one big thing we always have to kind of be careful about, especially when we're younger, is that sometimes there may be this really, really beautiful girl, or beautiful, man, or gender that we're attracted to. I'm gonna say beautiful gender that we're attracted to, and then we kind of like, wow, you know what? I'm gonna treat that person like a god, a god or a goddess, and we have to kind of be mindful of that. Like this girl in high school, that I was attracted to. I'm gonna call her Chloe. That's not her name. She always wears short skirts. Her butt would always be sticking out. Um, when we were a boyfriend girlfriend in high school for a couple of years, like every single time, like I'll go home to her place, she'd always be wearing like G strings and thongs, or she didn't have responsible parents. Like her parents would be like, okay, we're gonna be home. We're not gonna be home for a couple of hours. You guys can hang out by yourselves. Or I remember like one time I told my dad that, and he was like, you're gonna wait outside the house for like 3 or 4 hours, and then I'm gonna pick you up after those 3 or 4 hours because I'm busy right now, type of thing, really. And I'm gonna kick your ass if you go back into that house, really. So that's one big thing is being careful of people who are attractive, or because there's a lot of people who know that they're attractive, and they just take advantage of you. So that's kind of the big thing we got to be really careful about. Like I have a friend who is a model, but she's like saying something like, if you want to do a photo shoot of me, um, I will charge $700, $800, when usually a photo shoot would be like, 200, 300. So there's people who know that their sex appeal will attract people. The next thing that I want to talk about is in the movie. The first time we see Reze, she actually approaches Denji, and what she does is that what she goes into the booth with him, and the phone booth with him, and it's raining, everything like that, really. So the next trick that a lot of people do when they manipulate others is that they show vulnerability. Like she's in a rainstorm. She also sees him being alone, really. And then it's kind of like saying, hey, it's a really bad storm. Can you please, let's just, protect me from the rainy weather and stuff like that. And then also we know that there's the typhoon devil. So obviously that's causing the rain, really. So there's always a sense of, a person in distress, a damsel in distress, person in distress, So that's what a lot of people do who are manipulative. Like I remember, I've gone through a lot of rough things in my life. So I always would tell people, hey, when I was in middle school, I was like saying stuff like, hey, you know what? I have a really rough life, or you know what? Whenever I eat pizza at my house, my parents force me to eat 2 slices. My brother eats all the food that he wants, really. Or hey, sometimes when I'm home, you know what? I'm kind of starving, really, because my parents had really strict rules on how much food I can have versus my brother, who would kind of eat everything. Or I remember, in middle school, I would also kind of would say things too, or would say things that were not true, like saying, "Oh, well, my parents hit me because I did my homework wrong," when that never really happened, or my brother hit me or beat me up. And sometimes it happened, sometimes it didn't happen, really. But I always would want people to feel sorry for me, and that's kind of what she's doing with Denji in that the phone booth, is saying, hey, feel sorry for me. Hey, get me out of the rain, really. Hey, take care of me. So there's a sense of vulnerability. And then the next thing is that they go to the coffee bar, and what she does is 2 things: is that there's a slow burn, and she's also very supportive. And that's also another thing that a lot of manipulative people is they do something called a slow burn. And that means they act very friendly around you, they build your trust, and over time, they start to be meaner to you, or over time they kind of turn on you. Like I remember that there was this guy Salvatore who was a filmmaker in New Haven, Connecticut. Not a nice guy really. So like he would work on my film sets. He would give suggestions on how to do better. He would call me up and be like, hey, you know what? I know you're trying to be a better filmmaker. Here are some books and other things to look at. And then I know like one time he took me out to the diner, and then over time he would start to like be mean or harsh or do things like, I gave him like a script. I gave him like a script to look at. He gave me back grammar books, or he took many of my ideas, or he would say things like people use you more than you think. Like over time, he gradually just became more and more of a jerk to me. And that's kind of what manipulative people do. And if you even look at what happens with Reze and Denji, you know what? She's kind of a friend of him at the coffee shop, and then at the when they're kissing under the fireworks, she's actually wanting him to move away really, and it's moving a little too fast really. And that's kind of what some manipulative people do, is that sometimes over time you see them become more and more aggressive and more antisocial, or over time you kind of see that they want to get towards the goal really, and really what Reze wanted to do with Denji was try to get him, by himself really, so that way she can kind of like take him out, so that way he's away from the organization. She did not know about the Shark Devil, and that's kind of like, what her downfall was really, that that really the Shark Devil rescuing Denji was really her downfall, because then they kind of said, hey, you know what, you're the bad guy. The next thing is that we'll talk about the coffee shop, that she's obviously laughing at his jokes. She's teaching him how to swim. Like she's always very, very nice, really. And that's also a tough thing, but you have to be really careful of people who are very, very supportive of you. And one sad thing, but one true thing, is that if you're around people who are very, very nice to you all the time, you always have to be extremely careful, because you gotta say to yourself, you know what, if people are always really nice to you, and you're not used to people being nice to you, or you're used to people being rude or disrespectful to you, and this person's being outgoingly nice, you gotta say, hey, you know what, that doesn't feel real. Because also too, with Denji, another thing was that, she kind of laughs at his jokes and kind of saying, oh, you're funny and silly, and it does feel a little like kind of forced really. So that's also another thing. I gotta look at my clock because my brother, he's gonna be home in a couple of minutes. But that's also another thing about manipulative people. Like I remember, like again, when I was with my ex-girlfriend, when I was at her house, we were both in high school. We took a shower together, and I also remember like her always laughing at my jokes and hugging me a lot, and just saying like oh, you're silly, oh, you're funny, and she's always like hugging me while we were in the shower and everything like that really. And then I kind of learned that I was very lucky, because again, she was somebody that would have a pattern of lying on different men later on in her life, really. But also too, I had to kind of learn, she was that type of person that was like, okay, our parents are not home. My parents are not home, Byron. Let's go to the jacuzzi together. Everything comes off, or let's take a shower together after we like after we go to like the swimming, after we go to like the public pool and stuff like that really, like there's always a sense of, and then she'd always like laugh at my jokes and corny joke. It was a sense of fakeness, or she'd always give me money, or like sometimes at the dinner table she'd always be like hugging my arm really. Like sometimes there's overly, like you had to say to yourself that, oh, when I talk to other women, because I'm attracted to women, or I'm talking to other genders, like nobody's really doing that to me. So why is this person being overly like friendly? Why is this person being overly like sexually open? Why is this person being overly like nice to me? Or like, thinking that I'm like, like of high praise really. So sometimes when you see that in relationships, you just got to be very, very careful. And then the next thing that I would say about it is the pool scene. Like obviously this is a big issue with a lot of manipulative people, and like I said, like usually people look at manipulation as a woman knowing that a man thinks with their dick really, and that kind of happens in the movie with Denji when Reze goes into the pool where she's completely naked. So with my girlfriend in high school, there was a couple of things about it. That. Number one, her sister got pregnant at a young age, so she was also looking to get pregnant as well, really. So I remember that there were times when when she would try to seduce me, and like as I said, there would be showers together. There would be taking on a jacuzzi together. There would be things like, she'd be naked and she would be, opening herself up because she wanted, to get pregnant as well, really. Um, and there would be times where it would be like, if I said something like, hey, do you want to do you want to have sex or whatever, she'd always like say yes, because she was like cool with it, like, hey, let's have sex. Okay, I'm gonna like take off my shirt and we're gonna get down to business. That's kind of like how it was kind of with her. And then also there was phone sex and other things like that as well, really. So there's always like, whenever we wanted to do something sexual, she'd always consented and do it, or she'd always like try to get her clothes off, really, because she wanted to get pregnant because her sister got pregnant because she wanted extra attention and other things like that. And that's kind of true about like Denji as well, really. Like, like um she was like, okay, let's go to like the school together. We all know that she wanted to go to the school with him for two reasons. Like, obviously there's the Typhoon Devil, so obviously, uh, they can be naked for a while, really, and that's kind of what the thing was, really. They can be naked for a while because obviously their clothes got wet. You should not put on wet clothes, really, So obviously she knew about the pool. She knew about that they're going to be naked for a while. So maybe, if things worked out, she could have probably said, hey, you know what, this is my time to take him out, really, because I got him all horny, really, and there are plenty of people who do that. And then sometimes there are plenty of people who try to like have sex with people or try to seduce people and have sex with them and say, oh, well, that wasn't consensual, or oh, well, now I have power over you because now I got you. I gave you a really great night, really, so now you're obedient to me, really. Or there's plenty of people who are like, I want to get pregnant, so I want to keep seducing you, so eventually the pregnancy happens, really. I also remember like one time. I did a photo shoot with this girl, Lindsay, like over 10 years ago. And it was always like, we did it at my house, really. And I remember like, like we took some pictures, she was doing lingerie, and she was always giving me hugs. And then she was also saying stuff like, oh, well, if you, since you're taking the ride pictures, maybe what I should do is like moan a little bit. So she was moaning and screaming a little bit because she was trying to like, seduce me. And then she was also saying things like, just giving me a hug, or like, or one time she was like asking me if she wanted to go to my fridge, and then she was putting whipped cream on herself. Like, she was always trying to do seductive stuff, really. And it led to like her saying something like, okay, maybe if we shower together, I'll pay you an extra you can pay me an extra $200, $300. And it led to that, really, because I was being like a horn dog and I was not having good sense, really. And she wanted to go to Japan. No, she wanted to go to England, but she needed extra money to do some photo shoots, but she was kind of always seducing herself, really. And that's something that I've dealt with as well, really. And I kind of had a breakdown with her because I was saying, like, too, that, I had a really tough breakup and I really just wanted, somebody to love me because I was going through a very hard time, really. But I remember just taking the bait because I was so, like, seduced by her, really, and that happens, really. So fortunately for me, it was something that lost a few $100s, but it wasn't something where it led to a big problem, really. But that's also something that Reze did to Denji, where the whole skinny dipping scene was just her trying to earn his trust, really. Or even like and there's also the mother complex, because I think with Denji, I don't think he has a mom. So she's trying to do two things. She's trying to be the girlfriend. She's also trying to be the mom to him, because there's people who don't grow up with their parents. So sometimes, there's the mother complex. They may look at The Simpsons. Like, Homer Simpson loves Marge because Marge is kind of like his mother in a way, because he didn't have a mom growing up, really. Like, there's the mom complex. So people just try to be that ultimate person, as well, really, So those are things about manipulation. And then the last part of it is that the fireworks scene. She kisses him, and then she talks about, hey, let's move, let's get out of here. And one of the reasons why she wants to do that to him was because obviously she wants to get him alone, really. And I've been in, like, again, like this girl that I was friends with in high school wanted to get back together with me after years apart and after a bunch of bad relationships. Like, I know I'm doing well for myself. I make over 100 grand a year. um, I'm traveling, I'm doing other big things with my life, you know. So there might be somebody that's like, you know, I want to come into your life because I want some of that money you got. Or things like, oh, well, things are going well with you. I want to ruin your life as well, really. Or, you know what, now I have another friend who's pregnant and might become a single mother, really, because she has a boyfriend that's not being responsible. So there may be a sense of like, hey, you know what, I want you to be the stepfather, or I want you to talk to him, really, because I want you to kind of fix my life, really, or, you know, like, and all that stuff. And I'm not being somebody's stepfather. I'm not raising kids that are not my kids, because it sets a standard. It really sets a standard that, oh, well, you know, Byron's got to raise other people's children, and that's not what anybody should do, really, because then it promotes that thing about, you know, that thing about, okay, well, men, when men are responsible, other men step up, and I can't do that. So we got to be careful of manipulation. And I think the last thing we need to talk about is the dangers of forgiveness, because what happens with Denji and Reze is that, you know, at the end of the film, they're both on a beach together. And what happens is that Denji forgives and says, hey, did you really like me, or things like that. Like, obviously, you really don't know at this point, because they do a lot of making you feel sorry for Reze. Like, she almost gets killed by that guy with the knife, by that guy who wants to fillet her. You know, at the end of the film, like, her death is a little anticlimactic. There's a lot of ways you feel sorry for Reze. But I think towards that scene, you almost feel sorry for Denji. You feel like, hey, you know, they kind of connected a little bit. But ultimately, that's the ultimate thing. When somebody hurts you, when somebody manipulated you in the past, really, never forgive that person. You gotta say, hey, you know what, one and done. Really, you did all these crappy things to me. Why should I try to be your friend, really? You know, because I remember with my ex-girlfriend, when I was friends with her in college, she would always tell me different stories about how she was abused by different men. Now she told me a story, you know, 2 years ago when we ran into each other. She was abused by 3 or 4 different people on our way home from work. A lot of her stories don't add up, really. I actually typed in her name, and she's actually been involved in a couple of lawsuits because she's been a bad driver. So there's always been like stories of like chaos and carnage, and stories that don't add up, really. And then also too, you know, she knows that I love and care about her. So obviously, I remember my college years not being in any relationships with any women, because I was like, you know, I want to come back home, really. And then I found out there was a bunch of lies. And then there were a bunch of friends that I had that all saying that she was lying, really, like, you know, when she was involved with them. So, you know, do I really forgive her? I can't, because, you know, it's not good to deal with somebody who lies about being assaulted or being victims of violent crimes, really, over and over, because they want you to feel sorry for them, or they want to like manipulate you, or potentially they want to be like, hey, you know, things are going well in your life. I want to ruin your life with fake charges, or I want to ruin your life by saying, hey, these things happened when these things didn't happen, really. So, I mean, I know I told you some personal stories and all this, really, but I think that ultimately what I want to say with the Reze arc, you know, the movie, always be very, very careful of who you're involved with. There are a lot of very manipulative and hurtful people. And I also want to say it's not just men on women relationships or women on men relationships. It's all genders, really. There are very hurtful people, and there's also a lot of people who know that they're attractive, who know that they're cute, who know that they are sexy, who know that they come from money, who know that, you know what, they're very intelligent, and they will use all that to get their way, really. And they can really hurt a lot of people, but ultimately you gotta be careful, really. So I think that when we all watch the Reze Arc movie, you have to understand that in no circumstance is Reze a good character. In no circumstance she is a redeemable character. There's no circumstance she's even a nice person. And then when you meet people like that in the real world, you just have to say that's somebody that you get hurt by and you avoid. Or even like the ending of the film, you know, like a lot when during the ending of the film, there's an outcome, and what happened was a lot of people who were friends with Denji knew how she worked, really, and they're like, okay, we're not going to fall for your cute and innocent act, really. So because there's always going to be people too who get older and wiser, or people who are really good with psychology, who are like, hey, you know, I know this trick, I know that trick, and I'm not going to fall for that, or I'm not going to let you hurt somebody that I care about, you know, and other things like that. So I really think with the Reze arc, as I said, just to bring the point home, is be very, very careful about relationships. Be very, very careful about friendship. Be careful about working relationships. Be careful about fields you want to get into, like filmmaking that I try to get into, and other things like that, where you know that the environment's very like cutthroat and manipulative, and people have no problem hurting people to get themselves ahead, really. So there's a lot that Reze art can teach us. The movie can teach us about being careful around very manipulative and hurtful relationships, and definitely I think that that's like the central theme of that film, and it's a good one. And I also think that when we look at the character Reze, we have to look at her as a very manipulative villain character instead of just somebody with sympathy, because then you fall into that trap. And I hope that people realize this, because it's almost like when Harley Cameron became popular a few years ago. There's a lot of people that said, hey, you know what, a Joker Harley Cameron relationship is good. No, and also Denji Reze relationship is not good, and that's something they should not pursue in real life. And be careful of people like that.